Deborah Hornung. I'm 23 years old. I currently live in New York. I'm adopted from Ulyanovsk, Russia, and I was adopted in 2000. I grew up knowing I was adopted, and I don't think of it that it's weird. I don't think it's strange. I was in like kindergarten, preschool, running around and telling people like, "Oh, I'm from Russia. Oh, I'm from Russia." And yeah, I think it's cool to have a different background and to grow up with two cultures, I guess.
So my name is Alex Meyer, and I live in Colorado now. I'm married with two children, and I work in county services. And prior to living in Colorado, I lived in Hawaii with my adopted parents. I actually experienced divorce, but so I actually lived with them individually for the majority of the time after I was adopted. But I was adopted in August of '92, and from St. Petersburg, Russia. And from there, I transitioned to Hawaii, and I also have an adopted sister. She was adopted from Costa Rica.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Edward Dana. I am a Russian adoptee from Kostroma, Russia. I was adopted on August 17th, 1999, on my grandmother's birthday, which is very, very significant for me. And I am living in DC, and I work for DC government while also studying at UDC.
My parents did a really good job. I always knew I was adopted. They always told us, I have a brother that's biological to them, and they wanted another child. Medically, we're having difficulties, so decided to adopt. And they were looking for other countries and ended up with Russia. And it was always just something I knew. I never remember it being a big shock. If that makes sense. It was just who I was.
I suspect I was adopted a little bit older. And if not, that's just my thought on that. But if that's the case, then maybe I would have had a different understanding of what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so, by that point, I think I had somewhat of a good understanding of what was going on, to a degree, obviously. But I suspect that I knew that I was, being taken to the U.S. Maybe I didn't know there was an adoption or, the concept of that, but basically that a family was taking me, and I was clueless of the United States, or let alone another country altogether. But I think in general, I knew that something had happened that allowed me to leave the orphanage. Again, the concepts were probably, not something I understood, but by that point, I think I understood that, I had a new life.
Okay.
But my understanding is that you start out in a birth home, and then you transition out of that into the maybe the typical orphanage that, and they housed you until I think maybe you're a teenager. And there may be something in between that as well, which would make sense. But yeah, so I was essentially in, there's no proof of that that I have, but I think that was my transition. That's a typical transition.
I knew right away, but I didn't know the meaning behind adoption at that age. I was speaking in Russian. I wasn't even speaking English. So Russian is my first language. I grew up speaking Russian, basic Russian. My mom would say, "Oh, I came there when she first saw me. I started crying." She said, "Want a banana?" And I said, "Banana, banana," and I come and grab the banana and shove it in my mouth and eat it. I loved it, And she said that was the first time, we met. And I met my father and he picked me up, and I took off his glasses, and I saw these glasses. I've never seen such a thing like that. And just seeing how they were dressed and seeing everything was very different from what I was used to.
Yeah.
I was just happy. I didn't know why I was happy, but I think really I just needed to be loved. I needed to have a family, and I just felt like I knew, like I was gonna leave that place, and that's what made me really happy. I
Yeah.
think knowing that I was leaving the place, but at the same time, when I got to the airport, it was quite challenging because I've never been to an airport before. I didn't know all these people. I was, in a new environment, and that is all stressful. But I had a translator. I had my mom, who was really, really helps. She gave me the food. She provided me with what I needed, sandwich. I ate a sandwich for the first time.
Mhm.
Yeah. I definitely think it's very important to be honest with that child. Even if that child doesn't understand, it's absolutely the most important thing. You should never lie to your child. Lying to your child will make that child not be able to trust you. And as an adoptive child, I think trust is the most important thing.
Yeah.
So it's really good to be honest, even if the child doesn't understand, because when that child grows up, you can grow into it and add on to what it means.
Absolutely. I think it really um, helped me grow as a person. Not having that that moment, I guess, that you see like, oh my gosh, like I never knew, like now there's this sort of distancy, whatever. I think the best way to go about it is to just let that child know that um, family isn't blood, and that it doesn't matter where that child came from. That family is always family, and it's built on culture and experiences and relationships that are built up with that family when that child that you adopted. That's what makes family family. Never, my mom made it clear. She said, I'm never going to offer like more information than you ask for. She's like, if you don't have an interest, I respect that equally as much as you having an interest. So, we have boxes on boxes of files and paperwork that if you want to go through, you're more than welcome to. She's like, look at your birth certificate anytime you want. Look at any documents that we have. And there weren't a lot, but she's like, anytime you want to look at it, feel free. So they were also really supportive of me, my curiosity, and wanting to know later on in life too.
I do. I do. And of course, when you reveal that, is probably a lot is dependent on the child development and maturity. But I do feel like that's certainly essential. And I think it's something that whether both parents or whichever parent that the child becomes more comfortable having those conversations with. I think that's an important step in the journey that the parent would need to disclose. I don't believe that something that you would want to certainly leave out or keep from the child till who knows when. I think that that's definitely something that they need to know at some point. Otherwise, there's just that gap of knowledge or understanding of who that person is.
Yes, they always said I was adopted, even though I didn't know what that meant at 4 or 5. I asked them questions. Sometimes I asked them, what is Christmas like? I spent my first Christmas with them. And, I remember sitting on the bed with my little sister. I had a sister who was 1 year older than me. And we started talking about Christmas and how she enjoyed her Christmas and what to expect for Christmas. And we took pictures and we took video. My mom did home videos. She would always do home videos. So we would watch these growing up. And that's why I get to keep my memories, so strong after watching them over and over and laughing and looking back.
Yeah. Right. Definitely. So was your family open to discussing your adoption?
I got to thinking about this too. It was interesting. I think a lot of it from my memory is, my mother in particular really wanted to understand my past and how it was impacting me, and more in particular my behavior. And unfortunately, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a good experience. It was just a lot of she really was trying to dig a lot of information out of me that I was not really sure of. But I from my memory, it was just just a lot of digging into what happened. And I just think that she was trying to make a link, possibly, in the different behavioral traits that I might have had at that time.
To be honest, I really didn't have an interest in it when I was younger, so they really didn't. We went to one Russian comedy show, it was a dinner and comedy show, and I remember being like, well, that was cool, but I'm not really, interested at the moment to see more. So they kind of respected my wishes and didn't push anything more. We had nesting dolls from when they went, and they got a bottle of vodka that we opened on my 21st, and we have another like married or whatever. So we did things like that, but they didn't press it, I guess.
I don't know that there was much discussion outside of that. And people that I associated with outside of my mother were very warm and all ears. They were intrigued, and most people since then have been that way. I just think for whatever reason, I think a lot of it again was just my mother trying to link, that current stage in my life with what happened prior, and making sense of maybe my behavioral traits at that time.
Okay.
No, and I don't know if it was just that she wasn't aware of it or didn't research it. But no, I wouldn't say that we did as a family, or from my mother's standpoint. Yeah, and I don't recall associating with other fellow Russians, either by my age or older. So no, and a lot of that, once I was adopted and brought to the U.S., that past kind of just, we kind of basically moved on.
Okay.
Yes, my parents, when they got my sister the first time from Russia in Moscow, she was adopted at age 2, and they got some like plates and like a matrushka, which is like these wooden dolls that are hand painted. And she got these awesome matrushkas and Russian doll, and that was about it. It wasn't a whole lot. Like, it wasn't like we went to the Russian store to get our groceries. We actually ate American food. We ate Sri Lankan food. We ate, my dad's food too. So I think we had a very diverse and transracial family. I just don't think there was a lot of Russian culture in this house.
I think so. Now that I'm older and I have a different perspective, I think it definitely would have been cool, I guess, to I don't know, look up dishes or just talk about it more together as a family, because I find myself doing research now, knowing more about myself, and being like, oh, this would have been cool, and like, oh, this is cool too, like we could have done that when I was a kid or whatever. And I think I had a lot more questions about my identity the older I got, by not like integrating it more when I was young.
I think having a matrushka is nice. Having some Russian Russians materials is nice. Having a Russian fairy tale book is nice, you know. I just wish I got more involved with my Russian culture as a child.
Mhm. Do you feel like if there had been more integration of your Russian culture, it would have been easier for you, um, just transitioning in your family, in your adoptive family, and whatnot?
I think transitioning in the terms of like finding myself
Mhm.
and accepting who I am as an individual and figuring out myself, I think it would have been, yeah, I think it would have been a little bit easier to have that self-identity analyzed. I'm Russian and I am adopted and I speak, you know, I never really, I didn't keep up the language. It was hard enough to learn English, you know.
Right.
You know, I would say that I'm sure there were moments, nothing that specifically comes to mind, but I think, at some point I probably transitioned again. Maybe some of that was because that past was cut off, and wasn't really revisited. But I don't, I was able to transition, and I think a lot of my struggles were typical for that children experience, but maybe just a little bit to a higher degree because that disconnect from my past and culture, and I by that point I was already like we've spoken about, already 7 years old. I'd been separated from certainly obviously my birth parents, but also whatever family I would have known, I guess, would have been just whatever I had at the orphanage, which was not nothing by any means. So, I think it was just a lot of it was the typical transition that children go through. And then unfortunately, the divorce didn't help that transition. So I know I struggled behaviorally. Is that a word? But with my behavior, I did struggle quite a bit. Socially, I struggled, to adapt, especially at school. So a lot of visits to the principal's office. Yeah, it was just a lot of instability during those years. So, how much of that was attributed to the adoption, and just that past, I don't know.
As a child, I watched my parents argue, and unfortunately, that's just sometimes what children do have to see. And I think that was really hard for me, and I was more defiant. My relationship with my mother declined when I was a preteen. I was more closer to my dad because my dad understood me, and he actually had the patience to talk to me and tell me things more than once. Of course, I had to learn things. I didn't learn things the first time. I had to be told more than once to learn. And my mom was very stressed because she had to work, and she's the one who supported us. And my dad is the one who was retired, So my mom worked a lot. My dad stayed at home. He was a stay-at-home dad. My dad really knew. I mean, my dad already grew up, raised a child on his own. So I think he understood what needed to get done, but I don't think we understood each other. I really don't think that. I really think we loved each other. We knew that, but I just don't think we understood each other. Really did. I think we actually, this place was so hostile and so it was very dark at times, but there was good moments as a child. I memorized all the good times, and I really like to I get stuck in the past with my memories, and it's really hard to move on sometimes. And I've never put myself in a situation where I'm harmful to my parents or I'm at risk or anything. but there have been situations where we would be so upset at each other, we would argue, we would be picking at each other. So those things were just, very difficult growing up as a teenager. And I started to get the help that I needed at school, at the bridge program that I was at. And I was at special education. And I started to have a therapist every day, and we started doing family therapy. I was involved with CASE, which is a provider that provides support for adoptive youths. And I eventually left my home and I went to a group home. And that's when I really started to learn perspective and learning how to have an independent lifestyle. I didn't understand it. At first, I wanted to deny it. And when I didn't understand adoption, I was happy that I had a family, and that's all I saw. I didn't really think about my mom. Of course, I asked sometimes, but I had my mom. My mom was right in front of me, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, so I feel like when you're a kid, like you just kind of go off and life is life and it's fun. And the older you get, especially middle school age, and being a girl, it was kind of like, I don't know who I am. And normally look to your siblings, your parents for some sort of guidance and in knowledge and all that respect. They're the most wonderful people I ever could have asked to land with, honestly. But people would always ask, your eyes are so beautiful. What side of the family do they come from? And it got to the point where I was like, I don't know. And I'm frustrated and I want to know just as bad as you do. Yeah. So there were certain things that it was like I just got fed up with, and I kind of had like that identity crisis. And I was fine through high school. I got over it, I guess. And then again, as a young adult, it happened again, especially with COVID. So that's when I started to look for my birth parents. And it really, it is difficult in that, I know you're my parents and that you raised me and you love me with all your heart. But at the same time, you're not my parent. And that identity crisis was a little bit confusing. As soon as I turned 18, you're allowed to look for your parents, and my adoptive parents were always super supportive. So the first thing I did was got on VK, which is like a Russian Facebook, and possibly found my mother. And then she hadn't been active in years, so I went to her family and found my possible sister, messaged her, and completely scared the life out of her now that about it. So over COVID, I was like, you know what, let me revisit that idea. And my mom was cleaning out the attic and she found another paper that wasn't with my birth certificate stuff. And it had a description of my mother that wasn't on my birth certificate. It had said what hair color she had, what eye color she had, and all of that. So I matched it up to that profile I found in high school, and it was the exact same, down to the city, to the age, to everything. Wow. And I looked at the girl again now that she was older, and I was like, that's my sister. You can't tell me that sister.
Goosebumps.
Yeah. So I messaged the woman that was my mom. She had a new profile, and I messaged her with a screenshot of my birth certificate in Russian, and was like, use Google Translate because I don't speak the language. And I don't mean to mess up your life if I'm wrong, but I think you're my mom. And,
wow.
It was she came back 4 days later, and my heart was going like this the whole time.
Yeah. Wow.
My adopted mom had said always, ever since I was in first, second grade, there are many reasons for adoption. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, and you should accept whatever the decision was. Whatever it is, they give you a better life. We provided you with a better life, but there's good and bad to it. So I was expecting the worst, and she was like, oh, I've been looking for you forever. You have siblings, so we speak occasionally. I'm trying to learn Russian. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talk every now and then, so it's cool.
Has it been like awkward or anything, or do you feel connected to her?
I honestly, and I had like kind of a breakdown with my adoptive mom one day. I was like, I feel bad because I still feel more love and more connection to you guys.
Yeah.
Um, and she was like, it's natural. Like you spent your whole life with
Mhm.
us, like you shouldn't feel guilty one way or
Right.
another. But um, as much as I'm happy and that I love that I found them, I don't feel as connected to them just because it's been so long.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but if this conflict resolves itself and I get a chance to go over, I'd love to meet them and develop some sort of relationship.
So thanks to the help from Christine, I actually reached out to the organization last spring, and had a moment in early last year where I just felt like it was time. It was just really pressing on me, and decided to move forward with that process. Didn't really know where to start, but I got a little bit of direction from I can't recall who it was now, but I started by researching what information that the federal uh, Freedom of Information Act provided me. And from there, I reached out to Christine, and she was gracious to help me connect me with the liaison that was is still there, not part of the organization. Is my understanding more, but still has connections. And he was great. He probably within days or a week was able to provide a lot of information about my parents, and that I had two brothers, and one passed away in 2019. Just had some health struggles throughout his life from birth, I understand. But my older brother is still alive, doing well, and has extended family, daughter, grandson, and still lives in St. Petersburg. And we've been able to communicate regularly.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's been really enjoyable to experience that. My mother did have enormous struggles with alcoholism, which
Okay.
wasn't uncommon, at least in Russia.
Mhm.
Um, but there was some concern from birth that I'd have some effects from that, and I did have medical issue with my eyes, just basically a lazy eye, basically what it was. But my understanding with Russian culture, or just um, that if any small defect with a child, they're often put up for adoption.
Wow.
So not uncommon. But in addition to the concerns they had with my mother, and the drinking that the alcoholism that she had, and my brother knew of me.
Mhm.
In fact, he sent me a picture of that my mother and him out on the balcony of their apartment, and she's sitting down, and they're just gazing out. It was the day before he was to be enlisted for the army, and so he's out there with her, and apparently that photo is in June of '85. So she would have been pregnant with me. My understanding is her passing is a little bit of a mystery. We know she's deceased, or mostly certain of that, but her passing is a little bit of a mystery, due to some of the difficulties that were going on in the '90s.
I think they did the best that they could, and that's what matters. Not everybody's perfect. Not everybody's going to know what to do right off the bat. And I really feel like when you're ready to adopt a child, you're going to make mistakes. And my parents spent more time teaching us about their cultures and not so much with Russian culture, because we wasn't living in Russia anymore. We were living in America. And, you know, I guess that's their reasoning behind it. And I'm okay with that. I'm accepting. As an adult, I can get into my Russian culture. If you can adopt an older child, go ahead and do it, you know, because that child is probably, you know, would be, we'd be so, all children deserve to be loved. All children deserve to have that everlasting family to call their own, I feel like. And that doesn't mean that just because a child's a little older, doesn't mean that when that child is 18, that's it. No, when you adopt a child, that child's going to be with you throughout your life.
The fact that family is family, and it doesn't matter where that child's from. And I guess the other thing is be mindful of the fact that that child obviously like didn't come from you in certain ways. So like medically, like there are certain things that you may not think of because, oh, like, well, you know, like my one child may have this or whatnot because we passed it down, and you may not consider it with another child. But other than that, adoption is beautiful.
I think they have to go into it with an open mind. There's just so many different variables that you have to, I'm sure, that you come across for, you know, from that child's experience to how they're going to adapt to, what needs they might have, and what that transition is going to, what it's going to be for them. So, boy, I think, yeah, just have to be able to adjust, and like any parent to some degree, but there's just so many more unknowns, depending on, how old that child's going to be too.
Yeah.
Maybe there's going to be a little bit less if the child's much younger, whether it be infant or, but as the child gets older, in my case, boy, I imagine, I had, 6 years of history that really probably impacted me greatly by that point. Definitely don't try to do it on your own. But I think that there's always going to be that feeling of longing. Whether, I know now a little bit of my past that I didn't know a year and a half ago. But I'm still in that longing phase because I haven't had the opportunity to go back to Russia and physically be there and meet with my brother, revisit the areas that I was living in at the time, the orphanage, and there's, we talked about the adopted parents piece, that there are just some areas that that adopted parent just can't fill the void. And that's okay. I don't think any of this necessarily have to be looked at negatively. I know that there's a Facebook adoptee group that I've joined, and some of those posts are really they're very vulnerable and open experiences that everyone's having. Get to a comfortable place in your life where you're comfortable in your skin. We all go through that just in general, but I think, again, just that additional layer that we experience being adoptees. I think we just eventually, it takes us maybe a little bit longer.
I feel like some people will say, oh, I feel sorry for you that you're adopted, and it makes a child feel sad that he's adopted. And that's not okay. You should be proud, and don't ever think that you're not good enough. I think as I got older, my confidence grew and I began to accept who I am individually. And I'm proud to be a Russian adoptee, I guess.
Yes. There's a poem. It's called The Legacy of an Adopted Child. You read it. Basically, there were two women, and one gave you a life and the other one taught you how to live it. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, where you came from, where your eyes came from, or where any of that came from, heredity or environment. You are you. And it's beautiful that you have two different sources of things that made you you. And use your talents, use your skills, and be great.